You're watching Every Days and Saturdays, USMC veteran. Let's go, baby. And here's your host, Brian. Hey, what's going on, friends and family? Guys, thank you so much for joining me on another great day, another great interview. I'm super excited for my next guest. I'm going to close this up a little bit so we can talk about a couple things before we get to my next guest. Remember, guys, if you guys have Spotify, Apple, any of those things, you can listen there if you want. I know on the Spotify side, if you have that, you can also watch it there. Also, we're on YouTube. You can subscribe there completely free at EDAS. That's a dash USMC veteran. And give us a little subscribe. Doesn't, it won't hurt you or us. All right. Let's talk about another great thing. We also have been recently added to Reese Across America Radio. For all of you that are listening on the audio side, that's reaseacrossamerica.org/radio. And you guys can check us on Saturdays at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And like I said, I'm super excited for my next guest. We have an Army veteran. She wasn't ready to be a Marine yet, and that's okay. It's okay. We love all our brothers and sisters. But she also was a medic. And so we're going to get to hear all about her great experiences. She's had a lot of life experiences that she's going to talk about. How her experiences was while she was in, how life was getting out for her, and all the great things that she's doing today. So let's go ahead and bring on Marie Slider Henriksen. Did I say the last name right? Henriksen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good. Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing okay today. It's a good morning. I'm here, so
Hey, that's half the battle. We're breathing. You're up. You're moving. All right. Well, let's get to
yes,
go.
sir.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to hear all about your life experiences. Let's kind of take a little walk through your life. Give us a little bit of where you grew up. How life was growing up for you. What made you end up deciding to join the Army, and how you ended up getting yourself into being a medic. Talk a little bit about your experiences there. Then we'll talk about how it was getting out for you and what you got going on today. But now the floor is all yours, Maria.
All right.
Marie.
Yes. It's okay. It happens all the time. Thank you, Brian, for having me here. Like I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, so my name is Marie. And I'll just tell you a little bit about, my childhood. I had a rough childhood from the very beginning. I was born to addict, alcoholic parents, and there was some not good stuff going on. I was born in New York, Watertown, New York. My biological father had been in the army, which I didn't find out until I was in Germany
Oh,
and in
wow.
the army myself. So that was interesting, but he had been in the military, and then he ended up getting kicked out, and so my biological mom and him, they ended up splitting up. It was just not a healthy relationship. She ended up taking my brother David and I to California for a little while. But she was in a relationship that was another, abusive relationship, not very good. Um, when she would leave for work, he was just not a good guy. And, anyways, so she ended up taking my brother and I back to Arizona, which is where she was from. And we lived with my biological father's parents. But he was a trucker and kind of in and out of life for a while. The state ended up getting involved in taking my brother and I away, gave
Mm.
him an opportunity, but he had other choices that he was making. And so we ended up in foster care. We were in foster care with the Sliders, actually. Most of the time, we were with the Sliders. Um, Sorry, I know I say a lot. It's especially when I'm nervous.
No,
so
no, no, no. You're good.
So sorry about that. But we were with the Sliders for a little while, and then a biological aunt decided that she wanted us. So we ended up in Pennsylvania for a little
Wow.
while. And in Pennsylvania, after about a year there, she decided she only wanted one of us, and the state was like, "You're not going to split them up." So we ended up back in Arizona. And again, most of the time we were with the Sliders, and um, we had our struggles, just like any other family. They did the best that they could with the knowledge that they had and the rules that they were given. We were in foster care for 6 years,
What's
and
the age difference between you and your brother?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, and you guys got to stay together through this. Were you younger than him? Older than him?
I'm younger than him.
Okay.
He's two
Okay.
years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was always kind of that constant in my life, but I wasn't always very good to him. So, that's something that we can get into a little bit later, but yeah, he was always there with me through it all. And over those 6 years in foster care, there were rules with the state. You can't get adopted unless you have consent by the biological family, unless there's been 6 months without contact. And so every 6 months, the biological family would make contact, and we would have a visitation. I remember sometimes, the biological father was going to be there, but then he wasn't. And so we would just spend time with the grandparents. Also, one of the rules back then, and this is at no fault to the Sliders, I love them. And like I said, they did the best that they could. But in my young childhood, I never knew where I belonged because every 6 months we would see the biological family. And then every summer we would go to either a camp or another foster home so that the adopted family, right, so that they could protect their own family and be with
Wow.
their children. And so I understand where it comes from now, but for many years I was lost and I was resentful and didn't know where I belonged, and just felt real sad because I was like being pulled 5 different ways, not knowing where I belonged. And if I get emotional, I'm sorry because I'm still,
No. No.
kind of working through it.
Absolutely. No, I get
But
it.
it was the
You're good.
basis of a lot of my self-worth issues because I never knew where I belonged. And
Mm,
because of that, I became a chameleon
wow.
completely. It was, I had to be the happy go lucky girl because I didn't want to get left. I didn't want to get, taken away. I didn't know where I belonged.
Wow.
And so there was a lot of struggle in that. And then still kind of reeling from the abuse that happened before I went into foster care. I don't remember a lot of it, but the body keeps the score. There's a lot of the emotions. When I first came to the Sliders, my brother and I were very malnourished.
Mm,
And with that, had the little pot belly, like very malnourished. You know, um, Along the same time, I I started hoarding food because I didn't know when I was going to eat because of when I was younger. And so that started my food addiction. And so from a very young age, I was already in addictions.
mm.
I didn't know where I belonged. I was full of self-pity. I was full of insecurity, and then when
It seems like
I
your addictions became almost like a way of, like survival, right? Like,
yes,
it was a way for you instinctively you think you're surviving, right? Like the food, because you're not getting enough food and things like that.
yes, yeah. So
Mm,
it was rough. And then having my parents they had 5 of their own children, and then they did foster care for a lot of us, adopting 4 of us. And so we had a lot of kids in the house that had their own mental health problems, a lot of struggles. And so there was some, different things that were going on that was out of my parents' control, because it was they couldn't control everything, and you had all of these people, like at one point I remember being chased around with one of the older foster kids with a whip. And another
Mm.
time, one of the younger foster kids chased me around with a pencil and dug it in my back, and there was other things that were going on that were uncouth that, I won't really get into details, but it was stuff that really affected me.
Traumatized you.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
my parents, they were great parents. They did the best that they could. I remember my mom was at every event of mine. I was into sports, and I was into music and stuff like that. And she was always there. My dad, he was working a couple different jobs. He worked at a high school. And so he was a teacher, he was the driver's ed, he was the scorekeeper for all of the games. And so, like they were
Oh,
really great parents, and they raised me in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I fell away from that for a very long time, but I am now back into it. But like I said, they did the best they could. But in my little brain that has already been traumatized, all of these little things that happened just added more and more trauma. We were finally adopted when we were 9, or when I was 9 and my brother was 11. We were adopted and baptized. And, if anybody knows anything about the church, we were sealed in the temple. Um, and we thought things were going to be steady and everything was going to be great. And so the next couple of years were a little bit easier, but then when I hit puberty, there was a lot of different things. There was this perfect storm that happened that dug me deeper into some really heavy places. And one of that was when I was younger, I was hoarding that food and I was an overeater. And there was, in my family, food was something, and the culture that I grew up in, food was everything. Food is comfort, food is celebration, food is everything. We always had the big meals, we always had family over and had big huge meals, and food was just a big thing. And I never was able to address my food stuff. And so when I hit puberty and I started gaining weight, then it was, oh, I can't gain weight, but I don't know how to not eat. So I got into bulimia, so binging and
mm.
purging, and that was kind of my first big, addiction, and that's something that has stuck with me, you know, um, and off and on throughout the years. And so there was that. Along that same time, I was being abused as well, by somebody that was close to me, and I didn't know how it. They were young as well, and didn't know what was right or wrong, and I didn't know. There was a lot of things going on, but in that time, I didn't know how to love my body. I didn't know how to love the people that I wanted, and I didn't know how to receive love from the people that I wanted to, because it was not correct. And so in that, around that same point, was when I also started cutting myself for a little while. I
Mm.
was I was cutting the bottoms of my feet so that I could walk on the pain. And then around the same time, when I was 12 is when I was introduced to weed and alcohol. And so then, like, I don't know if you know anybody in recovery, but that first drink, I had arrived. Alcoholism became my life off and on. That was
It's
my
kind of a new
solution.
addiction now. Yeah.
Yes. And so the bulimia calmed down, the self-abuse calmed down, and the alcohol and the weed kind of became my thing. And when I had been younger, my schooling, I was a straight A student because I was like trying to like impress everybody, and everything was great. And then I get into junior high and I'm like, I don't care anymore. And so I started failing classes and I started ditching classes, and I joined a metal band, and I was the keyboardist in this metal band, getting high and drunk all the time,
Did you have
and
purple or pink hair going yet or
no,
anything?
I didn't
No.
do that till after
Okay.
I got out of the army, actually. But I had just gotten lost, for a long time, and it just continued on. And so I'd been traumatized. I never told anybody about the abuse. I didn't know how to understand what happened to me when I was younger, and everything grown up. I couldn't process what was going on. So I was just so lost in this this self-pity and anxiety, and putting on a show for my family. My family didn't know how bad things were. I didn't tell anybody. I was just so lost, and my ego, right? I am better at being worse than you. And so, like, this, because ego is I'm better than you or I'm worse than you. And it's really I'm better at being worse than you. And so it was
Oh,
like, I
yeah.
need to hide, I need to run, I need to, And so then I started manipulating and lying. And, there was all sorts of stuff. And I got into a really bad crowd. And at some point, my parents thought it was the people that I was with, and they were like, the people that you were with are not good. They didn't realize that I was the one that was getting them high, and I
You're the
was getting
leader.
them drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and like there was other stuff going on in with my siblings. They have their own journey. If they ever want to share it, I'll let them do it. But for
Sure.
me, it was, like, this was my life. And so at some point, my parents, I didn't find out until later, but this was kind of like a what's it called, a coup. Like, there was like a coup or something, where my sister-in-law, who was up in Utah, she called me up, and she's like, hey, I need some help to take care of my kiddo. Your brother's working all the time, can you come up to Utah? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I found out that it was kind of like, we need to get Marie out of Arizona.
Mm.
And so I was a junior in high school. I was 17. And within 2 weeks I was gone. But like, looking back, I talked to a couple of my
What are those
friends.
called when? Gosh, what are they called when everybody gets together and they read the thing? That's what it sounds like it was.
Intervention.
An
Yeah. It was
intervention.
it
That's
was like an
exactly.
intervention.
I was
Yeah.
drawing a blank on that. Yeah, not enough crayons
Well,
yet today. But
yeah. Well, yeah, like, basically that was it. But looking back, I've talked to a couple friends that I left in Arizona, and I was such a little shit, because I basically, like, blamed it on them that I was leaving. One friend in particular, she had been my best friend growing up, and I treated her like crap. I was just so uncomfortable. I was just so lost in a lot of things,
Mm.
and so I was reacting and pushing it out on other people. And I didn't know how to even understand what was going
Projecting, you were
on.
just projecting a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so my parents moved me up to Utah, and I was 17 at the time, and I moved in with my brother. It was 2004. And I was started working at KFC, and I told my brother I'd stopped going to church at this point, and I told my brother, you can't make me go to church. And he's like, well, can you go to seminary anyway, in my church? And I was like, okay. So I kind of stayed connected with my church, kind of had some spiritual experiences still, but I was so lost in a lot of different things, and I was still partying. And at one point when I was 17, I decided to go party with my boss and his friends. And we had gotten really drunk, and they had me smoke something that I don't know what it was.
Mm.
And my virginity was taken by three guys at that moment.
Mm.
And then my self worth was just gone. And I just kind of fell down a really deep, dark hole. And because it's the idea, like, I don't want to victim shame myself, but wherever you go, there you are. I never faced any of my trauma, and so I decided that alcohol and drugs were my life, and I ended up in a situation that I would not have normally picked, you know and so it was that just concreted my self-worth issues. And my parents reacted very well. They ended up, they're like, a few months later, they were like, well, you are our youngest, because I'm the youngest of nine, and they're like, you're our
Wow.
youngest, we want to see you graduate, we want to be there for you. So they actually sold their house and they moved up to Utah. and they
Wow.
lived with my brother and I while I finished high school.
Wow.
And I'm
Wow.
so super grateful for them, but I was just kind of still lost, and I couldn't appreciate it back then. I know
You were
they had
very
their own.
disconnected from everything, I
Yes.
guess, at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm super like grateful for that, but I didn't really understand still what was going on. And my last year of high school, my senior year, I had been failing so many different classes, and I felt so isolated, that ended up um I ended up having to take like 10 different regular classes and 6 internet classes just to graduate. And I was like, okay, I am not going anywhere. Nothing is happening. And I ended up in an argument with my dad because I wanted to move in with a friend and her boyfriend. And my dad's like, well, why don't you just join the Navy or something? And I was like, fine, I will. And the next week I was in the Army.
Wow.
I I remember when I was a kid seeing the TV or the commercial where it was be all that you can
Be
be
all
in
you
the
can be.
army.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I told myself that one day if I was ever going to be in the military, even though I never wanted to be in the military, that I would join the army. And so, yeah, so I went into the recruiters and I was like, "Hey, let's do this." And my dad's like, "Oh, what are you thinking about doing?" I said, "Well, I signed for 6 years." And he's like, "Why'd you do that?"
Oh my gosh. Talk about a
Yeah,
knee-jerk reaction right there, huh? Sheesh.
yes. And so basically, so it was such a quick thing. The recruiter came to school to talk to me. The next Monday, I went to this was the week of graduation. So the next week, that Monday, I went into the MEP station to do my ASVAB.
Yeah.
Wednesday, I think it was, well, whatever, the 1st of June in 2006, I graduated high school. And I had them introduce me as Private Marie Slider.
Oh.
And then the next day,
Little flex up there.
yeah, and the next day I signed in, and it was the best choice that I ever made, like I was completely lost. I didn't have any direction. I wasn't going to be able to get into college.
You
I was
sound
I
like you
was
were ready for it, right? I mean,
Yes.
you have been through a lot of things that, tested you, right?
Yes.
Mentally and stuff, so you
Yes.
definitely are ready for boot camp.
Yes. And I was just not in a good place, and I was like, I need to do something with my life. And so it started out as an argument, but I was so grateful that I actually did. And I was in the DEP, the delayed entry program, for
Yeah.
a month. And so I was
Okay.
able to like say all my goodbyes, and they had me, go into the range to learn how to shoot and doing push-ups and a little bit of running and stuff like that. And so
Gave you
because
that
yeah,
quick glance of, what you're gonna get yourself into so you can kinda be a little bit, I guess,
yeah. So I
prepared.
went in I went in as an E2 because of that.
Oh,
So
shit,
I was like,
nice.
awesome. Um, so yeah, so now I'm in the military, right? But you take this traumatized child and teenager and put her in the military and give her a gun. And yeah, my brain was still, it was not very good for a while. So anyways, I go train in South Carolina, Fort Jackson, do my basic. I do my AIT, my medical training in Texas, but the whole time I'm like sneaking alcohol and sneaking out. And you know I got into promiscuity. Like, it was just not a very good situation. And then I get to Germany, and I was so grateful to get to Germany, right? Germany was awesome. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. I was basically a civilian nurse in a military uniform working at the aid station out there, and it was awesome. Like, I really liked it, but my focus was all about the partying. It was all about the partying, and I ended up getting married to the first soldier that said he loved me. you know?
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. Yeah,
Whoa.
yep. And so then,
At least it's not a
I
contract marriage, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Shoot.
yeah. Well, he ended up getting stationed stateside after just a couple weeks after we got married because he had gotten his orders, and we're like, we're not done with each other. Let's get married, man. So
Hooking
yeah,
into each other. Yeah.
yeah. So we got married. He went to Maryland, and while I was doing all of the paperwork, I found out that he had his own life. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to tell his story, but he had his own life that he was living
He
down
was
there.
double dipping.
Yeah, and so I knew that I needed to, file for the divorce, and so I told him, I was like, listen, I just want the money for the vehicle that we bought, and then we can go. He fought it for a while, and I was like, all right, just take the money, just give me the divorce. So we got our divorce, but during that time, in recovery, we say something about becoming a pickle, right? If you sit in the brine too long of alcohol, at some point you stop being a cucumber and you become a pickle.
Mm.
That time is when I became my pickle. My alcoholism just went out the window, and I was showing up to work drunk or not at all. I wasn't showing up for formation. And I would be drunk during PT and just like throwing up. And, anyways, they put me in the Army substance abuse program for a little while. And all that is an hour a day, just do your class. I just got better at hiding it. Like they even let me go to the bar at night, but I just got better at hiding it. So there was no like real addressing my issues, right? So, anyways, so Germany, I was
You
there
were
for 2 years.
pretending like you were, though.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah.
So I was in there for 2 years, and in Germany, and really I enjoyed it. It was great. It was beautiful. Talking to a friend of mine that I was stationed with out there, she was my pharmacy NCOIC. We still talk to this day. She told me that my alcoholism had gotten so bad. She told me that at one point it was like looking at a stranger on a train.
Mm.
She told me that I had gone with them to Prague, and she had to tell me if I picked up a drink that they would leave me there. I don't remember this, but
Wow.
just my life was about drinking. It was about my alcohol, and I just most of my trips, I remember just walking around drunk in different cities, just like ooh, like it was just that's what
You're
my
damn
memories
so a
were.
lot of your shit was a blur, man, huh? You're
Yes, yeah,
unfortunately, you,
yeah, but
drank your service away damn near.
yes. But Germany was fun, like
Oh, yeah.
being a medic,
They
I
have good
was
beer over
able.
there too, so, I
Yes,
mean,
yeah,
gosh,
yeah.
that'd be an easy place to go get lost in.
Yeah. But the medical was great. I was basically a civilian. I worked at the aid station. We helped people like that. It was a health clinic. It wasn't even an aid station. It was a giant health clinic. We had everything. We had even the dentist office right next door.
Were you
And
guys still in
so
uniform, though? You guys still had to
yeah,
wear yep, yep.
still in uniform, but sometimes we had a uniform scrub, which was kind
Right.
of cool.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I worked with the doctors, and basically, did vitals, and did sutures, and did casting, and all of that stuff, sick hall type stuff. We did medical readiness for all of the units that would come train. After I was there for about 2 years, I ended up getting requested to go to Washington State. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And what's really crazy is I had this like weird dream. And, in the dream, I heard Charlie. And as it was such a hard dream that I had. And, anyways, come to find out, I ended up in Charlie Company in 29632B 3-2 Striker Brigade. Anyways, it was Charlie Company, and I had a dream, but it was crazy. So, anyways, so I get to Washington, and I'm in Washington, and like as soon as I get there, they're like, "Hey, guess what? You're gonna deploy." And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
"Okay." All right, so you got this traumatized girl that just partied the last 2 years, and now you're going to throw her in Iraq. That was fun. So, anyways, did some training.
You're ready.
Yeah, yeah, did some training down in California for a little bit. Did some training in Yakima, Washington for a little bit, and then got sent to Iraq. And in Iraq, I was in Bob Warhorse, Bakuba,
What years are
and
this? What years are these?
this was 2009 to 2010.
Okay.
Yep, I was in one of the striker brigades out of Washington. It doesn't exist anymore. They have there was a lot of corruption going on in that unit and other
Mm,
things, and so they ended up disbanding it
wow.
a few years after I got out. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of corruption that had gone on in the unit. There were some deaths that should not have happened. So one in particular that I still really struggle with as a medic. I Half of the time I worked in the aid station, or as the kind of the cleanup crew. I did the ambulance driving, getting people from the helipad to the aid station, or the aid station to the helipad. Um, but like one in particular, one of the deaths that really struck me was a striker that went over a bridge, and everyone was injured. The driver and the gunner were KIA, and I was on duty when they came in, and that was the first death that I had to deal with.
Mm,
So those ones were a little bit rough.
yeah.
There was a couple other things, that happened, but for the first 4 months, I did that ambulance run, you know, and then and we were getting mortared every day.
Mm,
We had people along the front line that were getting hit. Um, and then the second 4 months, I ended up going out on missions with the field artillery guys for 4 months. So I was living with them, with a couple other females, that would go on missions with us as well. Like, so we had different teams, and I would go with I think I had the red, black, and white team, and then my other friend had the blue team, which was the bigger. And anyways, we would go out on missions mostly every day, and I had some different events. So I was the field medic in the vehicle with these field artillery guys. We did a lot of kind of taxi jobs where we would take the higher ups to go, and then we would be their protectors. um, and I had some really awesome experiences out there with some of the local community. I was also part of a team that helped train some of the local nationals with medical stuff. We helped them learn how to do, like, we were our job was basically teaching the local nationals how to support themselves. And so I remember one of the missions was going out and teaching people how to do a greenhouse. One of them was teaching people how to take care of their own medical. There was a lot of the higher ups having conversations and stuff like that. But there was definitely some shady stuff that happened. I remember at some point the drivers that were taking us or guiding us, they were trying to get us go down the shady road, and we're like, nope, we went the other way. There was
yeah.
a couple other things,
They seem a little
that.
too adamant about going down that road, huh? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there's a couple shady things that was going on, but overall, like, I really enjoyed it. I got to meet a lot of the local nationals. I would give candy to the kids, or have tea or dinner with some of the adults. Our um, we had ways of sneaking alcohol, and so even in
Mm,
Iraq,
yeah.
my alcoholism was just taken over. I never really kind of processed anything from my younger age, and so I was still getting drunk all the time. You
You're like
know,
you're that one person like, did you get some in
yes,
the mail?
yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was being traumatized because I'm dealing with some death, and we're getting mortared, and
Mm.
at one point I saw the town next to me get blown up, and I thank God every day that I was not shot or blown up. I thank God every day. But as a medic, having to clean up that and
Mhm.
having to know that my friends were dealing with that kind of stuff. I lost a couple people I knew over there, you know. That was really hard to deal with, you know. And then on top of that, we had all of this corruption going on in our unit. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I was a part of some of that corruption. You know,
Mm.
you had higher ups sleeping with lower enlisted. You had people marrying other people, you know. For myself at one point when we were really drunk, um the next day I was doing an IV on someone, and there was a bunch of us that were just messing around, and one person ended up slicing another person's leg, and there was all sorts of drama that happened with that, and there was an investigation that happened, and anyways, there was the kid's leg ended up getting infected,
Oh
and
gosh, damn.
yeah,
Mm.
and
Must have been a nasty cut.
he ended up getting medically discharged because I did not do my duty.
Oh shit.
And so that really affected me for a long time, you know, and I've since made amends with this guy, and you know, we are okay now, but it was really rough, you know, kind of dealing with all of this stuff. And maybe I'll get in trouble years later for bringing this up, but I'm bringing it up, you know, because you know, we it just there was just so much going on, and I was a part of
Well, you're
that. You
owning
had
it. You know what I mean? This
Yeah,
is how you but this is how you move forward, right? You're
yes,
owning something that's hard to own. It's not
yes,
easy to, own that kind of stuff, but this is good for you, for your recovery and moving
yes,
forward. So,
yeah. And then we also had our you know, some of our higher ups lied about their like our ends our oh, I don't remember what he is, sergeant major or whatnot, lied about some of his stuff and ended up getting kicked out. Anyways, there was all sorts of stuff that was going on that was not couth, you know. And so, anyways, so after being in Iraq for 8 months, I went home on leave, and I'll try and sum up, you know, some of the rest of this little part. But after 8 months of being in Iraq, I went home on leave, and my hips gave out on me, and I could not get out of bed.
oh shit.
And yeah, and so the next 4 months, they sent me back to Iraq, but I was doing physical therapy, and they told me, "Hey, you're getting medically discharged." I had bursitis and tendonitis of my hips, which I have later found out that it's a genetic condition that called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. My body makes the wrong kind of collagen, and so all of my connective tissues are degenerating. And it started in the military.
Shit.
Um, yeah, and it led to last year I had to get bilateral hip replacements.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I got medically so that last year in the military, I was being medically discharged, and so they grounded me to the fob. So I'm traumatized dealing with everything, you know. Then you had military service and traumatized with that, dealing with all sorts of like corruption and mental health problems. And then you tell me that I can't do the job that I've been training to do, and my body is falling apart. And so then my self-worth just plummeted, you
Wow.
know. And so that leads me to the point where, you know, I was officially medically discharged, and not knowing where I belonged or what I was going to do.
Wow. Well, this is a
Yeah.
good moment to take a quick break, and then, like I said, when we come back, let's talk about that transition and how that was. I know that had to be hard, especially when your term is up before you're ready for it to be up, type thing. So, when we get back, we'll take a quick break, and everybody grab a little quick beverage or something, and we'll be right back.
Join us for Hero Stock, a special event dedicated to honoring our veterans and first responders. Experience a day filled with incredible live music performed by those who served and protected our communities. Connect with our nonprofits dedicated to helping our heroes thrive. Discover the services available to support our veterans and first responders in their journey. Bring the whole family. Kids will love the fun activities designed just for them. Reconnect with your community and celebrate the courage and sacrifice of our heroes at Hero Stock. Join us for a day of music, support, and togetherness. Check us out today on www.herostock.org.
All right, and we're back. And if you guys want to go check out Hero Stock this year, it's in Ashland, Nebraska on August 23rd and the 24th. It is a great time. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. All right, Marie, let's go ahead and get on to probably some more of the hard part, and then we'll get there. You know, we're traveling along your river, and so now we'll talk about how transitioning out of the military was for you, especially being medically discharged.
Yes, sir. So yeah, they medically discharged me, and like I am so grateful because they ended up doing me a solid. They gave me my 5 the day I got out because I was an E4, and
Oh,
so
shit, nice.
they gave me my 5 the day I got out because they're like, hey, you know, if you would have continued, you would have got your promotion. So here you go, which really
Wow.
helped me. So I got out with a pension,
Oh,
with
that's
my
good.
disability.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And
That's
so
awesome.
and the thing is when I was
That's
getting
helpful.
medically,
That's
yes,
helpful for that transitioning because that could have been way worse for you, right?
yes. Well, the thing is as I was transitioning out, I was actually working at the brigade surgeon cell, which helps with the medical readiness. So I was making sure that my stuff was good, you know. And
Ah,
so yeah, so
aha.
sneaky. But
Bing, bing.
yeah, so I was able to get my disability when I got out, and I was already situated with the VA. I already had
Good.
appointments scheduled. You know, things
Perfect.
were so much more smooth on the medical and the disability side, but the
Great.
emotional side was not. You know, you get out of the military, and you know, at least for me, and I know with a lot of other people, you just get thrown on your ass. Like your unit is just done with you. The people that you were with, they're just kind of gone. You're
And
in
no
a
need for you
state.
know anymore, and they're probably jealous first off that you're out, you know.
Yes, yes. And so then I tried to go back home where I grew up in Arizona. I'm like, yeah, I'm going back home, you know, and everything was the same, but I was different. But everything was also different. And so it was just this weird where I tried to like blend in and meld in, but I was super traumatized. I never dealt with anything. And so then I just got right back into my alcoholism and my addiction, even worse, you know. But I was like, okay, I need to do something with my life. So I started going to school, and I was so grateful for the GI Bill. So grateful. So I went to school. I got my I got my AA in general education and my Arizona general education curriculum certificate because I was going to go in for elementary special education, but I found out I loved math. So I started going to school for applied mathematics. So I was a year into my BS in applied mathematics, like working on that. But I
Who
was
likes
drinking all the
math?
time, drugging. Yeah. And I was also in a very, you know, a codependent alcoholic relationship. I was so lost, and I was dragging this man down with me. You know, he had
Mhm.
his own struggles. He was military as well. He had PTSD. He had deployed 3 different times, you know, and he had his own struggle. But you know, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm focusing on me, right? Like I was just so lost, and I just kind of dragged him down. But to my family, I put on a face, and nobody knew what was going on. And I just lied and manipulated, and nobody knew how miserable I actually was. So when our relationship, you know, ultimately ended, you know, everyone's like, what happened? What did you do? You know, they didn't know what was going on. And so then I was, you know, just kind of lost. I had lost him. And so I ran away and I moved to Florida. Now, the good thing is with the disability stuff, you know, like I had at least that. I had my disability over there. I had my health care. I was going to mental health this entire time, but I was doing something called selective honesty. So I was talking about this, so you don't ask me
Yeah,
about this. And
right.
so I was talking about all of my trauma, like poor me, pity me, you know, but hey, I'm not going to tell you I'm an alcoholic. I'm not going to tell you
The
that I'm drinking to
sabotaging
keep
part,
drinking.
the part that you're sabotaging, right? And your
Yes.
part, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also had all of this physical pain that I didn't know what to deal with because, like I said, I found out that it's a genetic condition and it's affecting my entire body. But I just thought I was like overreacting, or maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe it was the depression, or maybe this. And so I never really knew. And all the doctors didn't really know what to do with it either. And so, anyways, um, so I end up in Florida and I wind up partying with these college kids and just in this miserable state of being because I just I lost my shit after I moved it from Arizona because I had dropped out of school. I lost my fiance, I my dog died as soon as I moved to Florida. So I just kind of lost my shit. And I was working at a brewery, and my life was
And your
about
shit wasn't on stable mode already, anyways, right?
yes,
You were on that tilted. This
yeah,
son of a bitch just boom rocked you
yes.
off, huh?
And so I just there was a lot of different situations that happened where like basically God was just like, yo, you need to stop because you're going to kill someone or yourself. I almost got in a really bad accident my last night of drinking. Almost got in a really bad accident with a friend, and
Mm.
God's just like, he literally grabbed the wheel and straightened it as somebody went zooming by. My friend and I would have been killed on impact. We were
Girl,
going
you had a lot
70.
of rock bottoms. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Sheesh.
Yeah. And so it was at that point where I was like, okay, I need to make some changes. So I ended up in recovery and met some really amazing, amazing people that just helped me kind of, just realize that I had worth again. I ended up getting back it like I went through this spiritual journey. I put the drink down. So when I got sober, it was alcohol, drugs, and alcohol, weed, and pain pills, right? I stopped that. And but I was still indulging in the food and nicotine and caffeine and people and stuff like that, and so over the years I've gone through this journey of overcoming it all, you know but at the beginning it was just the alcohol, the weed, and the pain meds. And that first year was so hard. It was so hard. I was on antidepressants, and after about a year of being sober and on the antidepressants, my body started having manic episodes that my brain couldn't handle. And I started having like seizure like episodes. But I also found out that there's a possibility that could be POTS, and I can get into that a little bit later. But I ended up, they diagnosed me. I ended up in the psych unit after about a year and a half sober because just my brain could not process through everything, and I got triggered back to some abuse in my childhood. And so I ended up in the psych unit, and that's when they finally diagnosed me PTSD and bipolar and borderline. Over the next few years, it was really struggling with a lot of different things. Um, then, and right around in the middle of all of that was COVID. And so then you got isolation on top of everything. And,
COVID
anyways,
really hurt a lot of people's mental health on
yes.
top of it all,
Yes. And
right?
around that same time, I lost a lot of battle buddies to suicide that I deployed with. And so there was a lot of struggle in that internal struggle. I had been suicidal, and I got really into my food addictions and stuff like that. And anyways, I'm trying to kind of compress because I know we're running low on time. But basically, over the next 5 years, so between 2017 and 2021, um, uh, I went through ups and downs, but really started kind of like going down, down, down again in my sobriety. And in 2021, I moved out here to Utah. My dad had gotten dementia, and I wanted to be closer. And around that time, I kind of got lost in some family dynamics, and I tried to force myself into situations that I wasn't comfortable with. So I had to build up some boundaries. I also started doing trauma therapy. As I was doing the trauma therapy, they realized that I'm not bipolar, I'm borderline. The meds stopped working. I started having a lot of cognitive processing issues and memory problems. Along the same lines, I'm losing weight because I got up to 250 pounds. I'm processing through a lot of stuff, challenging my food addictions. I started losing weight. As I started losing weight, around the same time, they ended up taking me off of all my medications because they're like, you're borderline. We're processing through a lot of the emotions, processing through everything. I end up in the psych unit again at the end of 22. And that's where they detoxed me off of all my meds, and they kind of started helping me process through that food stuff. I end up in the beginning of 23. They find out my body starts getting worse. As I'm losing weight, the weight had kept me stable. In the military, the muscles kept me stable. My weight had kept me stable. When I started losing the weight, my body became unstable, and everything started moving more than it should have. And my hips tore apart. And
Wow.
that's when they found out, because I was still really flexible among all of this. They're like, something's not right here. And that's when they found out that I have what's called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And over the last couple of years has been that diagnosis and treatment for everything. Basically, my body makes the wrong kind of collagen. And so all of my connective tissues are falling apart. I had my hips replaced. I have to wear braces on my knees now, braces around my hips for my SI joints. I have internal problems, digestive problems. I have blood pressure problems, something called POTS, and also MCAS. Hyperactive nervous system is POTS. MCAS is a hyperactive mast cell or histamine production in my body. And so everything kind of bounces off each other, which also causes a lot of mental health stuff. So, on top of all of this, I had been self-medicating for so many years that, I was kind of struggling to process through all of this stuff, and this is the first time that I'm getting off of all of these stimulants and stuff. I wind up in getting bilateral hip replacements. I end up in a care facility in October of 23. Around that time, I started dating my husband, and we ended up getting married last January while I was in the care facility in between my surgeries.
Wow.
Yes. And so that was really awesome. He's a Marine
Oh,
veteran as well.
nice.
And
Super proud, brother.
yeah. And so around that time, so I'm in the care facility. In the care facility, I'm dealing with more mental health stuff. I get lost in my bulimia again, kind of struggling with that. My husband has his own PTSD breakdown.
Sure.
When I get out of the care facility last year, we both ended up in an intensive outpatient program for mental health.
Gosh,
And
man.
so that thing was phenomenal. We were able to process through a lot of stuff individually and together. And, in this new marriage, I moved in with him, and we
So
were
you guys
able
went
to
from
just,
probably being mentally unhealthy together to kind of being able to help each other when
yes.
you see the mental health happening, right?
Well, we had been able to help each other from the very beginning. Like, I've known him since 2018. He's been my best friend.
That's the
Yeah.
great part about
Yeah.
kind of that veteran connection, right? At
Yeah.
least you kind of understand
Yeah.
when we lose our shit and like we got to dial back. Some people
Yeah.
look at us when we lose our shit and totally judge us, and I imagine it's a lot easier to have a partner
Yeah.
that kind of gets it.
Yep. And he's been processing through his stuff. I've been processing through my stuff. We just got off of our honeymoon. We went on a month-long cruise, and it was amazing, and it
Yeah,
was
that's funny that
fantastic.
you said that because I was just thinking about, oh yeah, she went on a little bit of a trip there
Yeah.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, awesome.
But yeah, so that's kind of what my life is like right now. It's I've got this amazing husband. I am doing a lot of physical therapy and emotional, mental therapy, processing through stuff. I'm off of drugs, alcohol, weed. I'm 8 months in remission from my bulimia because I kind of got stuck in that when I was in the care facility again. I'm not on nicotine. I'm not on caffeine. I'm active in the recovery community. I help other veterans get sober.
That's outstanding.
I work through, I do a lot of writing in my sobriety. I started writing and I write poetry mostly about my recovery and about finding faith and love and hope and joy and overcoming trauma and pain and resentments. I have a book coming out, hopefully in the next couple of months. It's called More Me Than I Used to Be, A
It's
Journey
not
of Healing.
hopefully. It's not hopefully.
Well, I'm saying hopefully in the next couple of months. It
No, we're
it
gonna
it
say it's coming out. It's coming out soon.
it is coming out. I just don't know when yet, but I'll keep you posted. But it's
Now I'm gonna
got it's
push you a little bit on it.
yes. It's in the last stages of editing right now.
Okay,
And so
perfect.
it's with
So
my
it's out of
poetry.
your control, right? Yeah.
Yes.
All
So
right.
it's a book of my poetry and a book of my photography as well because I've done that over the years. But yeah, and I'm active in my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I my life is literally about spirituality and about recovery right now. It's about helping others find hope and it's about finding that strength to keep going every day and to just let God be in control. You know, there's a lot of resentments and frustration and struggles that I've held on to for so many years, and I am working to let them go, and I'm able to, you know, I have become a different storyteller. My story hasn't changed, but I've become a different storyteller as I am seeing the past me and the people in my past with a new lens of love and compassion. And I am not perfect. I still have a lot of things that I'm
I
working
think you're
through.
going from almost being a storyteller to being more of an advocate, right? And
Yes.
now
Yes.
you eventually, when you find that point in your life, when you reach that the top of the mountain for this, you're definitely going to be able to look down and help others, right? I mean, a lot along the way. It sounds like you are already on that path, and I'm sure anybody that's going through recovery understands that recovery is every day. And it's a lifelong thing, right? It's something you'll probably have to struggle with for the rest of your life. Um,
Yes.
but the good thing is, it sounds like you, you're able to recognize things, right? And that's the whole part about being able to move forward is having accountability, even when it's hard, right? And you realize, and I hear nothing but ownership, accountability in your whole story. So, Marie,
Thank
you're
you.
definitely on a great trajectory, and my gosh, what an amazing story and recovery comeback for you. Definitely for us, I think that we got to have you back on, but we're gonna go put you on the coffee talk with Brian, and that way me and you can kind of just hash out, talk more in depth about your recovery journey, and
Yes, sir.
what that looked like for you, because there's a lot of people out there in the exact same shoes that you that need to hear that, right? Because um, look at you now. There's a lot of times you could have gave up. You could have become a statistic. You could have became the number, part of the number. You know what I mean? But you're continuously wanting to do work better and get better, and I love that.
Can I just throw out there, okay, for anybody who is struggling, veteran or not, call 988. Call them. Call them 50 billion
Down
times
there.
a day. Even if you are not suicidal, they will sit and talk with you if you are struggling. In the middle of the night, if you're having all of those thoughts, I have called them, I can't tell you how many times, and they have saved my life so many times when I didn't even think that I was suicidal. So I will tell you 988 or the psych unit, get your ass to the damn psych unit as often as you need to. It is worth it.
Yep, they're there to help you, right? And they want to, um, the world is way more open to the mental health than it ever used to be, right? So we got to make sure that we're we're taking advantage of that, and a lot of us are getting healthy, so we can give the next generation a healthier mental health. you know, and a lot of us are dealing with a lot of childhood trauma and trauma in general, right? You know, there's so many things in life that makes life just an obstacle, right? You know, and some of us don't have to go through what others do, you know, and some of us that have been through it have the opportunity to become an advocate and speak up for the voiceless, and you get to become a voice now, right? And
And
that's what you're out there doing, and I
and
love it.
people need to also remember, and I will say this and shout it off the rooftops, comparison is the thief of joy.
Right.
Do not compare your
Yes.
story to others. Your story
Ooh,
matters. My shirt right here.
gosh.
Your story matters. Your
Yes, I
story
love
matters.
that.
Yes.
Right, and I love that because I hate when people compare their life to someone else, and it'll never work, right? So I'm
Yes,
glad you
sir.
said that. Anything else you want to say real quick before we head out? I once again I thank you so much, Marie. You're an outstanding human being, and you keep doing what you're doing. You know what I
Thank you.
mean? You're
Thank you
you,
for
you're
letting me be here.
definitely gonna be a big impact in our community with,
I appreciate it.
especially we need help with our sisters, right? There's not a lot of people out there being the voice for our sisters. You're one of them out there. So
Anybody can reach
you
out
and I
to
are,
me.
yeah, you and I are going to keep in touch. You know, we might think of some things if you're down to keep going, and that way we can get your voice out there. But thanks once again, Marie. And if you hold tight, I'll be right back there. Enjoy the crayons back there. And thanks
Thanks.
again. All right, friends and family. Well, hey, that was another great one. And my gosh, she has such an inspirational story. And I do promise you guys, keep in tune with us. This isn't gonna be the end. I want Marie to come back. I want to have her on the coffee talk with Brian. I want us to talk a lot more about her recovery and what that looks like, because there's so many brothers and sisters out there with a very similar story to Marie. There's some of them that are still going through it or haven't even gone through it yet. So if we can get these kind of things out there, maybe we can touch someone, maybe we can help someone with their journey, and you know, make it be more fruitful. Because a lot of us ruined our lives, you know, in our early 20s, and I wish we could save these guys so they don't have to spend their 30s trying to recover all the damage they did in their 20s, or even going into their 40s trying to recover it all. So you know what? Let's keep trucking. You know, a lot of us have been trained like no other. So sometimes we got to reach deep and grab that training. And don't forget, once again, that crisis lifeline, 988 veterans press 1 if you need some help. But anyways, hope you guys have an amazing day. You know how we say in the show, don't let the day kick your ass. Make sure you're out there kicking it. Until next time, we'll see y'all.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.